We had millions and millions of views. Rachel, the rugby player, and she was paralyzed. And she went to University of Stanford Hospital and they treated her and she was there for like 21 days and she got her upper body back, but she couldn't get her legs working. They drove down to Southern California to me and within 3 hours, I had all the power back in her legs. In 21 days, she was walking. In 2 to 3 months, she was back on the field.
Hey, Smart Chiropractors. Welcome to Interviews by the Smart Chiropractor. I am Dr. Jeff Langmaid here with my co-host, Dr. Jason Deitch. Today, we have the opportunity to sit down with a friend and somebody that you are going to want to listen to. If you're seeing people in your practice, we'll explain why. Dr. Ken Cooper, founder of Concussion CPR. Ken, thanks for coming on and chatting with us today.
Oh man, it's my privilege.
Well, it is our pleasure because this is an area of expertise I will say I do not know a lot about. So I'm excited to learn from you. We've had some chats offline, but I want to bring them online here. And for docs listening, we said concussion CPR. That's where we're going to be focusing our discussion today. And for chiropractors listening that maybe haven't dealt with concussions, or we're going to get into what they need to look for. But for many chiropractors, where does chiropractic fit in, or a chiropractor fit in to concussion treatment? Let's start there, then we can dive into a bunch of rabbit holes together.
That is a beautiful question because unfortunately, most guys don't even concept that chiropractic is the key to concussion rehabilitation. So first of all, I want to go back to the why. There's an urgent problem with the current screening and treatment of concussions and mild traumatic brain injuries. And the truth is that the current system is antiquated and is dangerous. And we can talk about that in a minute. And the results end up having like physical symptoms and mental symptoms, emotional symptoms, behavioral symptoms. It can go from weeks to months to years, an entire lifetime. And this is why, it's just so critical for us to kind of dive into that thought process and to start to seeing, what we can do and how we can make a big impact.
There's probably a lot of chiropractors that see a lot of people who have in fact had concussions, but wouldn't call it a concussion, wouldn't even know to think of it as a concussion.
Right.
One of the things people and chiropractors, people also, what do they need to know about concussion to sort of enter this conversation and recognize whether it is or isn't something that requires this type of care?
So let's start with prevalence. Okay. Now we're going to use statistics from 2018 because those, we've been a little kind of crazy CDC type of research since then. But in 2018, there was 3 million adults over 65 years old that went to the ER because they fell. And we know about 600,000 of them actually had a head trauma. Now, we know as chiropractors that when they fall, even if they're not actually hitting their head or hitting a block or something like that, smacking that goes on inside the cranium it's going to happen. It's just, we realize that. The problem that we have is that let's say this is your grandma and your grandma's out there gardening and she falls and she hits her head and she goes to the ER and radiographically, they're going to do a CT scan and they're going to say everything's clear, go home, go into a dark room, take Tylenol. Okay. These are dangerous. As a matter of fact, Tylenol in the research has been said to be resolution toxic. So toxic towards the resolution. Why is that? Because what we know is that Tylenol blocks glutathione. Glutathione is one of the major antioxidants that has to happen when the immune system's engaged, and particularly glutathione job is to close the blood-brain barrier. So within hours of an impact, that barrier, think of it being like your jeans, right? That barrier breaches open. So you fall and you like rip your jeans, right? Now your knees sticking out. That's exactly what the blood-brain barrier does, and that does it within hours. Well, the problem is we need that to close. We need that to close because every time that it's open, anything that's toxic in the body go into that brain and it's going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, Dr. Stephen Janopoulos and I talked about, it's not just a physical thing with a concussion. For those guys that live on the East Coast where there's a lot of rain and there's a lot of mold, and there's chemical concussions as well. So we have to be aware as to where this is going to go. But here's the scenario. Grandma goes home, She's given the all clear, said stay in the dark, um, take the Tylenol, and essentially what that does is that breaches the blood-brain barrier. Like here's the sequelae. Later, a month, 2 months, 3 months later, you say, you know, grandma's kind of not remembering the things that I used to tell her. You know, she's becoming really forgetful. You know, grandma, I went to her house and she left the stove on, you know, and all these things. And little by little, we start seeing these changes until the point where you're like, there's no way she can live on her own. She needs to be going into a home. And that's really the true scenario. And in the meantime, you got things like her bowels being changed, like crazy statistic. Did you know a high percentage, and this is over 70%, people that battle IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, started as a concussion?
Yeah.
How
That is news to me.
crazy is that? Isn't that news to you? So, I mean, so the regular chiropractor, he goes into his consultation and the lady goes, yeah, I'm giving you my list of things. I've got this, I got this, I got this. So I battle IBS. And the question was like, when did you hit your head? When was the concussion? I mean, that's what my team is trained to know. The other thing we look at, like a person has a 400% increase in the possibility of blown out an ACL or a shoulder labrum within 12 months of a concussion.
That's weird. Is it a proprioceptive issue or what's going on?
Absolutely. It's a vestibular issue because, your brain's like a big bowl of jelly, and then you got this spike that's going in there. That's the brain stem. And when you've got that trauma, there's a torquing and a twisting. And that torquing and twisting is going to have an effect on two primary things. Number one, the cerebral spinal fluid. So CSF is the fluid that feeds the brain, is what's get rid of waste product. And we think of it like a fish in a fish tank. It gets all its food out of the water, but it poops in the water. Kind of the same idea. But what happens is when we have a subluxation that was created by that trauma, now what's going to happen is that's almost corking that fluid. As a matter of fact, there was a great video shot on ESPN, and it was with the guy that used to be the quarterback of the Chicago Bears when the Chicago Bears were the bomb.
Jim McMahon.
Right? Oh, dude, that video. I mean, if you want to, I can send you the link so you guys can watch this. But that video, they actually show him pre and post MRI, which is something we can do as well, which is cool. Pre and post MRI showing CSF flow before and after an adjustment. And what he specifically said was, as soon as that adjustment happened, he goes, I felt like the toilet in my brain flushing. And you can literally see it on the MRI, as you can see all this damage and degree of destruction that's in. There's a white matter and a gray matter, and it just seeps away. So that's the one part. And then the vestibular part, number two, is like where you are in space and the balance. And the thing is, we want that athlete to be able to get the hand off, go through the hole, able to see his hole. But because he doesn't have his balance, and then the secondary thing is eyes don't track symmetrically anymore. So they're tracking like this. So when they do that, what Heidi Halleck explained to us in her research was the brain actually fills in something that it thinks is there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's there. So he never sees that other, linebacker coming on the side and just takes him out. Or the other scenario I hear all the time is after this happened and the person says, like, it's crazy, I was turning left and like out of nowhere there was the car. Well, yeah, because your brain kind of filled something into it that didn't actually exist, and you never saw that car started to make that turn and got T-boned.
That's a really big deal. And I want to drill into that just a little bit more. And every doc listening and watching, we also want to shout out, click on down below. You can visit Concussion CPR. Ken does a fantastic job with his team, really coaching and training how to implement this in your practice. But I have a question for you. You mentioned, we're talking a little bit of geriatrics. So we went into some athletics. I'd love to talk. We have a lot of young docs that take care of young athletes. Absolutely. Is there an age bracket on this? Is there too many concussions and you can't work the system? When somebody's approaching this in their practice with a patient population, is this apply to everybody that's had a concussion, or is there something that everybody should keep an eye out for in terms of?
Yeah, you know what? The better and better and better you get at this, what you realize is what a broad spectrum you can work with. So, last week I dealt with a 3-year-old. You guys will appreciate this because we've all been in practice. So we've all been in the trenches and understand. This mom calls in tears. She goes, I don't know what's wrong with my son. So our team says, all right, come on in. When they have you come, they come there. Then and we have an open bay, and I tell them, oh, you're on the next table, and they're like, we're gonna need a private room. Okay, so let's walk to a private room. We go into a private room, and we go in there, and the mom starts bawling, and then the dad starts bawling, and then the two young children, which is like a 3-year-old and a like 2-year-old. Of course, they start bawling. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And the mom's like, I don't know what's wrong with my kid. He's having fevers on and off. Oh, right. Immune system dysregulation. That's one of the big 12 that happens in a concussion. He's vomiting for no reason and then having diarrhea. Gut dysregulation. That's another big one of the top 12. He is getting freaked out in the middle of the night and having nightmares and coming into our bed every night. Right. Again, it's a screaming concussion. I said, when did he hit his head? And she's like, he didn't. And the dad's like, you know, he's like, and that was that moment you both look at him like, what's going on? He goes, yeah, the young one's been headbutting his older brother. I'm like, he's what? It's like, yeah, he likes to like grab his head and boom, or like that. Like, oh my gosh, he goes, this kid's got a concussion. Cool, we're just gonna train him for a concussion. So it was really cool. We play and have fun, but in our technique, we can treat a 3-year-old. We can treat I had an 8-year-old last week that got hurt and lose the ability to swallow. Get that? That was pretty crazy. But then I've had that case that, got picked up by CBS in LA because we had millions and millions of views. The one you guys know about, Rachel, who was, she's a student at chiropractic school at Life West that was a rugby player, and she was paralyzed. And she went to University of Stanford Hospital, and they treated her, and she was there for like 21 days, but and they helped her a lot, and she got her upper body back, but she couldn't get her legs working. They drove down to Southern California to me, and within 3 hours, I had all the power back in her legs. In 21 days, she was walking. In 2 to 3 months, she was back on the field.
Well, let's talk more about that, Ken. I'm on your website, concussion.solutions. We'll put the link down below. And it says here, add concussion protocols to your practice. So
Yeah.
you're both sharing, your experience in practice as a chiropractor who's really developed a system or a series of protocols to help address concussion specifically. What happens if a doc is interested in learning more about your protocols? How does your system work? They book a call with you, and then what?
Yeah. So booking the call, pretty much what we do is I'm gonna kind of explain a little bit about what we do, but we're also going to go back and ask him about his practice and how could we seamlessly add this to it. So here's the thing, Dr. Jason. In the past, you had to be a guy that did like the chiropractic neuro certification. So you had to do like 300 hours of, neurobiochemistry to be able to treat this way. And those guys can, we'll use this example. They can talk about the metallurgy of the hammer, but really what my job was to do and what I was able to do is teach you how to hit that nail and drive that nail in. And so it's taken me 7 years, but in 7 years, I created this online program that we can teach a doctor with very easy things to add in, like in his exam, even a straight vitalistic chiropractic exam, 1 or 2 neurological tests. If you're hearing those key things like IBS, like shoulder labrum, like ACL, like I haven't had a period in forever, or I don't poop every day, or all of those little things that I'll teach you, all those little things you're listening to. And they're going to do 1 or 2 simple neurological tests to identify if indeed that's the case. If indeed that's the case, then we created a protocol that has got like multiple steps to it. But the biggest thing is that person's going to go into a regular chiropractic wellness based care. And on top of that, we're going to add these very specific things that we're going to do to clear the concussion. The one protocol will take about an hour to do. Um, and there's some equipment that's going to be needed, but it's all it's relatively inexpensive. The truth is based on our findings and based on what we know your equipment costs are going to be, your return on investment on the program is maybe 3 to 4 patients. 3 or 4 patients, you paid for this whole thing. So, and just so you know, because we now have become the concussion experts in our community. This last month in March, we saw 25 different concussions. We treated 25, right? And so in our program, each of those cases are going to be about $5,000 to $6,000. So it's easy to understand the financial component, but more so the purpose. We started a movement to save the world's brains. Many times docs will call and they'll say, "Hey, I'm really interested in this because my own child has this or that." And you both know many of our mastermind group in the UAC members that have flown their kids out, and most of our friends will just stay here at the house. But if they don't, I have a hotel literally across the street from my office. But like the Franzens have been here, and the Berlows have been here, and Malcolm Rudd from Australia has been here, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But so what I was going to say though is a lot of guys, they'll say, "Hey, you know what? Can I bring my kid?" I'm like, "Yes, bring your kid. Watch the magic we're going to do, and then do this for other people."
There's nothing more impactful or important. Ken, I'm going to encourage everybody listening and watching to click the link down below and connect, because I'm going to say a few things about this. I'll extrapolate a few thoughts you eloquently said. I'm going to put it into short form here, which is there are probably way too many people in your practice, if you're listening or watching, that have a concussion that you're unaware of. The second component is, where else are they going to go? If you think about the alternatives of what they are receiving in the traditional world, it is probably not aligned with the objectives and goals that they're trying to achieve, or certainly what you are trying to, help them with in terms of their overall health and wellness. And there is nobody, in my opinion, better suited than a properly trained chiropractor to take care of these exact issues. So if you are somebody like myself, as I said at the top, hey, this has not been a forte of mine, I got a feeling there's a lot of docs listening and watching that they feel that way. Ken, you have put together a fantastic program for exactly solving that issue. So the chiropractors can step up, feel super comfortable and confident, have all the tools, all the systems, all the processes necessary to take care of this underdiagnosed, undertreated, and quite frankly, in many cases, wrongly treated condition that affects millions of people worldwide. Right. Ken, we are up against the clock. With all that being said, I'm going to encourage everybody, click down below, click on the episode show notes, connect with Ken and his team, learn how you can learn from the best and have concussion CPR in your practice. Ken, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Oh, my privilege.
Thank you so much for watching this video on The Smart Chiropractor. To not miss a single thing that's clinically oriented, marketing oriented, or more, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel today.